stranded in space on a ship crashing into the atmosphere of an unknown planet. Emile Spencer knew that the only way to survive would be by his own wits and guile. He vowed that somehow he would find and slay the titanic cosmic beast that put him in this predicament, VY572. With every installment, we follow Emile's explorations and discoveries on this journey of revenge against all odds. I'm Midnight Jester, and this is the Left Behind Starforge series.
Last time was the Great Rescue Mission, where Emile went down onto the unnamed planet to try and see what he could do to help Dash and Vert. Now, along the way, he wound up in a bit of a conversation with Dash, where there was like some tense moments regarding Emile's history with the Vault Hunters. They were able to get past it with a little bit of convincing that, like, hey, it's in everybody's best interest right now to not really worry about that. Emile tried what he could to be like, hey, I'm a good guy, I promise. And Dash was like, not up to me, bro. But sure, I'll definitely take your rescue. After that, Emile went to rescue Vert from inside the facility, which had done even more crumbling since we last left it. Vert was trapped inside some rubble. Emile worked his way back in with a little bit of a handheld system of modifying his gun to be a bit of a heat blaster to melt away some rocks. He was able to find a smart gun kind of system inside the sewer, which allowed him to do that without burning his hand. Definitely ran into some trouble, but was able to get Vert out of there, and now we resume play with Emile coming back with Vert. Though before we get into that, honestly, while we're in this whole begin a session move sort of territory, why don't we continue the vignette that we left off on last time? Because you might recall that our last moment of last session, Dash had discovered the captain, and when we last left the captain, we know that he had been given instruction from the Wooden Heart to basically play innocent. Do everything he could to get everybody on his side against Emile so that he could be set free from this cell, and then together, maybe he could convince everybody else to be a little bit more amenable to the Wooden Heart's desires. Dash is standing on the side of this energy barrier that separates the two of them. It's a sort of crackly, translucent red just energy field that takes up the doorway. Dash is standing on one side of it, and on the other end, the captain is not standing, but just down on the floor, kind of looking miserable, and looks up towards Dash, and does his best to try and emulate his eyes just lighting up with a kind of, like, as if a person is seeing an oasis. And the captain does what he can to try and take little steps at first. He knows he has to have a subtle touch on all of this. So all he says is, "Please, tell me your name. It's been so long since I've had someone to talk to. Please." And Dash doesn't immediately see the harm, but has a sort of lingering suspicion. Or like he's sure that there's something off about this, and he doesn't know what it is, and starts kind of turning away on instinct a little bit, like as if it dawns on him like this is clearly like not an area he's supposed to be in. And the captain says, Wait, don't go, please. Just listen. I'll tell you mine. I've had nobody to talk to. My name is..." And I need to roll on an oracle because I have not determined the captain's name. We've not seen it in play. But apparently, and the captain's going to give his real first and last name. The captain gives the name Zoya Silva. Neat. My name is Zoya Silva. I was captured by Emile Spencer. Dash hesitates for a moment, but then decides that he is going to ask, "Why did he capture you?" And then the man in the cell, whose name we now know is Zoya Silva, says, "Well, I screwed up. Nothing all that major, just a tax technicality, but I did wrong and pretty sure he's turning me in for the bounty. Really wish I could take it back, I gotta tell you. Will you tell me your name?" And we're gonna keep this vignette relatively simple. I think at this moment, Dash, like we see on his face that he's kind of considering it, but before he can make a decision one way or the other, we start hearing the sounds of Emile and Vert coming back. that kind of pushes him back away from, like, he was about to maybe say, "You can call me Dash," but hearing those sounds, he just kind of has a sort of guilty feeling like he's in an area where he's not supposed to, looks back and goes, I have to go, and just hustles off. But we see a smile on the captain's face, because the captain was able to see that moment of wavering. Chipping away one little bit of a time, all he has to do is make sure that Dash sees him as not a threat and just a kind presence. And as far as he can see, he's made that first little cut. So, nothing all that major, but just a brief little vignette as we see the progress is moving forward on this kind of vague threat in the background. So we take +1 momentum as we go back to Emile and Vert coming onto the ship as we hear them kind of clanking up the ramp together. Now, as I recall, the first real priority is we've got a couple of people who are rather injured. Both Vert and Dash have their own injuries. Dash, of course, has a wounded leg. It's been splinted back together and he's been hobbling around. Vert had a building basically fall on him. He's certainly got some injuries to tend to. So I think what this looks like is Emile and Vert get back onto the Stardust, coming into the cargo area. Dash meets them down there, having probably taken something of... We know that there's some kind of elevator, like hover platform that can be used to get up and down that ladder. We used it on the Star Child. Probably taking that same thing to kind of hover down that ladder. The three of them meet up there, and Vert definitely takes Dash in a big old bear hug, kind of lifting him off the ground. We hear like, "Yeah, all right, easy. I'm glad to see you're okay. We did it. We fucking did it. Can you believe it?" And like, half says that to Emile as well. "I can't believe we got the signal out." And Emile says, "Look, first things first. Y'all are in terrible shape. Follow me. Let's deal with some of these wounds." And the three of them come up together and go into the med bay. And again, this is a med bay module, so this will help me in this healing process. As Emile is going to try and set it all up to just get some sort of auto dock kind of stuff working to, at the very least, put a more permanent kind of splint on Dash's leg and run some scans to determine if anything is wrong with Vert after basically a building fell on him. Like, he seemed to be doing okay, but maybe it was an adrenaline thing. Like, just wants to give him the once over and make sure we're all going to be fine. So the way I'm going to represent this is we're going to do a heal move first on Dash because he's got a known injury. And then I think we're going to do a gather information as we use the med bay to sort of scan and determine a little bit more about Vert's condition. So let's start with the heal. So since we're in our med bay, if the action die is less than our vehicle's integrity, which is currently 4, we'll get to re-roll it. So let's see what happens. In this case, Emile is providing care, so he gets to roll his wits. I rolled a 4, which is not lower than our integrity. It matches it, so we can't re-roll it. And I did get a weak hit. We don't have enough momentum to do anything about it. We came so close to getting a strong hit, but not quite there. So on a weak hit, the care is helpful. Basically, again, we're not tracking his exact health, so I don't need to worry as much about the exact amount that I give him. The important thing is, healing happens, but the recovery costs extra time or resources, so I either lose momentum or sacrifice resources. We're talking about a -2 to either of those, so that would either hit my supply by 2 or bring our momentum down. And honestly, I feel like thematically, like, we are bringing the momentum down. Like, we're really putting everything to a halt here to just deal with wounds, and it makes sense that we're losing narrative momentum, so let's bring that down to 2. We're back at just like a starting point here. I'm all the more glad to have done that little vignette to boost it up a little bit so we're not lower. So I think because it's just a weak hit, we're going to say that, yeah, this makes like a better sort of cast than just a rudimentary splint, but it's not like super sci-fi surgery that just immediately makes his leg fine. I don't think Emile will be taking that kind of time right now. With a med bay on this ship, maybe that sort of thing is possible, but this is just some first patching up. Gets it so that Dash can walk around a little bit better and maybe give some of them good drugs to make it not bother him as much. But now the important bit, as Emile finishes that up, he looks towards Vert and explains basically what I just said, where, while we're both in here, I'd really love to take a look and see, just to be certain that your body's not hiding anything. I know you seem like a really big, tough guy, and that armor is probably doing a lot to protect you from that fall, but there's a big building that fell on you. Big pile of rubble. Let's do our due diligence, all right? And we don't need to make I think it's a reasonable enough thing. Nobody's going to make him compel Vert to do that. So let's just do this gather information. And let's see. So another wits roll, and this time we get... All right, a weak hit only because I rolled a 10 on the action die. Rolled fantastically on some other stuff, but sadly couldn't quite overcome it. So on a weak hit, the information provides new insight, but also complicates your quest. Envision what you discover, then take +1 momentum. So the idea I have on this is we learn that actually Vert is okay. However, the complicating part of this is we know that Vert had on his person a comlink containing Ironside's personality. And while Vert is okay, the Crush utterly destroyed that comlink. Like, it's inoperable, Ironside is inaccessible. It may not have destroyed everything on the inside, but certainly as a device, it can't work. And Dash is there in the room as this discovery is made, and it's just like, no, and like can't believe it at first. And Dash is just like sifting through these people, like trying what he can to get the comlink to respond in any way, but it's clearly like in several pieces. It's not going to happen. And I think Emile is experienced enough and observant enough at reading people that he's able to put 2 and 2 together a little bit and says, oh shit, so Ironside was on that comlink, huh? And Dash, still flustered, just goes, yes, he was. There's got to be a way. There's got to be a way. And Emile goes, I live by those very words. There is a way. We're going to find it together, okay? Just take some deep breaths. We're both smart people. If we put our heads together, we can find a way. But I need you to take some deep breaths first, all right? And this I'm actually going to do as secure an advantage. I think we are trying to make preparations towards finding a way to get Ironside back online. And in this case, it's with heart. You know, he's trying to be sociable and a little bit of a command here, but mostly sociability to just make sure that Dash is back in his best headspace. And that's going to give us the best chance at success here. So secure an advantage with heart, and we get, all right, another weak hit. So we succeed and get to either have momentum, 2 momentum, or 1 on our next move. And in this case, I'm going to let this build up the momentum. So Emile just starts kind of guiding him along, setting the pace of like some nice deep breaths. Meanwhile, Vert is like apologizing, feeling like an utter oaf for having screwed this up, and just being like, oh man, Dash, I am so sorry. And Dash has his eyes closed while doing some deep breathing as it starts calming him down a little bit more, and just says, it's okay. All you broke was your comlink. You didn't break Ironside. And I'm just glad that you're okay. And we're going to get off this damn planet. It's all going to be fine. And there's clearly still some tension in his voice, but he's no longer like his hands were just like shaking before from just adrenaline, and that part isn't happening anymore. He's stressed, but it's calming him down. And now I want to do another gather information roll for Emile, because now that things have calmed down a little bit, he's going to take this opportunity to assess the comlink and, importantly, the electronics inside. And with the help of his computer, his AR system is going to highlight certain things. He's trying to determine how salvageable are the innards. Are they utterly annihilated? Are they completely salvageable if they just get them out? Or are they going to need some inherent repairs in order to possibly get anything of the innards to work again? So, gather information is another wits roll. And at first I was about to say, and maybe we get a +1 from our AR, but that's not a device that we have like some of our other cobbled together things. That's just something I've always determined is like key gear on his person. So no +1s, just a straight wits roll, and we get, all right, a nice strong hit. So you discover something helpful and specific. The path you must follow and action you must take to make progress is made clear. Envision what you learn, then take +2 momentum. So because this is a full-on strong hit, I think Emile determines like the best version of that, which is indeed like, look, the good news is the chip inside doesn't seem to have sustained much damage. Sure, this part over here is never going to be able to send out a radio frequency again, but the flash drive inside seems to be just fine. All we got to do is extract it. And is it fair to assume that that robot chassis that I saw outside by your ship is Ironside's old body?
Yes, but it certainly sustained plenty of damage in the crash itself. I was not able to get it back together.
Well, to be fair, you tried to put it back together with very limited supplies on the planet. No disrespect, but I think we might have a little bit better of a shot here on this ship taking our time when also not trying to survive. Look, I got some things that we're going to have to do first. I'm on this planet for my own reasons. I've got to get my companion Fern back to their home. Soon as that's over with, though, we'll get this baby in flight, send you back to, well, I guess we're going to have to talk about where it is exactly that you're going to get to. But we're going to have a lot of time on travel, and I got no doubt that we can get Ironside's mind back in his body. Sound good? And I actually am going to make this a compel roll, because we do still have the just like general influence of the wooden heart making people at odds with each other. And these are a couple of people that have been surviving terribly on this planet, and they finally have a rescue, and they don't want anything else to go wrong. They know there are some horrible creatures on this planet that could be a big problem. Like, they want to get out of here immediately. Emile's talking about sticking around to send Fern home. That sounds terrible. They want to at least get into orbit. So let's make this a compel roll. How compliant are they with the idea that Emile's like, I got some other shit to do first? So I'm just going to treat this like a heart version. It's closest to charming or bartering, all of that stuff. Okay, we do get a weak hit, which is the classic, they'll agree, but they have their own demand or there's a complication to it. And in this case, it's not going to be a demand. The complication is just definitely that I'm going to advance the sort of like clock in the background of, while Emile is doing this, like, Dash is definitely going to get to know the captain a little bit more. Zoya is going to have more of an opportunity to try and sway him away from Emile being a good person. And to a degree, this also lends a bit of an idea to it, like it very minorly, but Dash is primed to not be as into Emile right now because Emile isn't giving him what he wants, which is to get off the planet. So between that and the captain slowly working on him, I'm going to treat this like a 4 clock. Just a 4 countdown. We already had 1 tick on it from before, from just their interaction. We're going to boost this is going to give it another tick. We're up to 2 on that. Just slowly Zoya is getting into Dash's head. And if that clock ever fills up all the way, then what that's going to represent is that that Dash is convinced that Zoya isn't the problem and should be let out of his cell. So Dash kind of grudgingly agrees and says,
well, as I've said previously, you're somewhat at your mercy right now, so if this ship isn't leaving the planet, all I can ask is that you please be hasty about it.
Emile says, well, I'll be as quick as I can, though, to be honest, I'm not really sure exactly where I'm headed. And I think Fern has joined them in the room at this point. Like, Emile says that over to Fern, who starts trying to do the basic communication of ideas about, like, specifically where they live, because Fern doesn't want to just be on the planet. Fern has a particular, like, cave somewhere on this planet that they used to call home, and really wants to be brought back to that specific location. So Emile, like, turns to Fern and says, anything look familiar? You got any ideas? Like, what are we looking for, buddy? I want to get you as close as I can. And we're going to do this in a little bit of broad strokes. So this is taking a little while, which is part of why the clock is going to be able to advance on the whole Dash and Zoya thing. Like, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for him to talk. And I keep saying Dash, but this is also going to represent dealing with Vert. Like, it's both of them being brought over to Zoya's side, while Emile and Fern are distracted. So Fern and Emile, as we broad strokes this, they're up in the cockpit. Fern has been giving some, like, descriptions and ideas about what they're looking for. Like, these are rough ideas about, like, what kind of stone, like the color of it that was remembered, or types of animals that were nearby that Fern used to prey on. Just anything that can be done to kind of narrow this down. And I think Emile is going to try and put together a bit of a computer program to read data from up in the sky as they like scan the surface, flying over various geographic features. And it's basically an algorithm to determine like what is the percentage match of what we're scanning here to the description. And it's a long process. It's a big planet to be searching. They're like slowly narrowing down options and finding it just at least like where might we find a place like that, even if it's not the exact location. You know, I think this is more about finding a suitable home for Fern and less about finding the exact cave where Fern once came from. Just what is something that'll meet those qualifications. So I'm going to start this with a secured advantage, which is just representative of Emile's putting together this program that will assess the data that's given and narrow down options. So it's just going to be a quick wit secured advantage to program this, and we get... Okay, a full-on miss. So you fail or your assumptions betray you, pay the price. This is going to be a relatively low pay the price because the stakes weren't exactly that high. He's just programming a thing. I'm going to go with the simplest and easiest option right there that also helps up the tension. We're going to advance that Zoya clock to 3 out of 4 because this just, it takes a lot of time. Emile wastes a lot of time trying to make a program that doesn't even work. So we totally fail, and in addition, in the background, at this point, we should probably even get another little vignette with what's going on back at the cell. So I think hours have gone by with Emile working on this, and this is just a little bit of a scene between Dash and Vert. Because Dash encounters Vert in the hallway carrying a tray with, like, some food on it. And he seems to be carrying it in the direction where Dash knows Zoya is, and I don't think they've talked about him all that much yet. But clearly at this point, Vert has also spoken with him, and Dash just goes,
"Are you bringing that where I think you're bringing it?"
And Vert says,
"If you mean to Zoya, then yeah. Guy says he hasn't eaten in a while. Gonna get him some food." "Are you sure that's a good idea? I don't think there's a way to get it into his cell without risking him getting out."
And Vert just goes,
"There doesn't have to be anything that keeps him from getting out. I keep him from getting out."
And while he's saying this, he like gestures over with his head towards the pretty powerful gun that we know he carries on him.
"Point taken. Do you mind if I come along as a bit of backup just in case something?" "Suit yourself."
And, you know, again, I'm going to keep this pretty short, but it's just a quick scene where Dash and Vert come to bring the food in and are expecting some trouble, but Zoya doesn't do anything. Or nothing bad, that is. Zoya completely like waits on the opposite end of the cell, not even facing the door, lets them put it in, lets them close the door behind, and only then kind of comes over and starts eating and just says, "Thank you so much. You have no idea how long it's been. I can't thank you enough for just treating me like a human being. I don't understand why Emile can't do that." And he's like saying the last bit with like a little bit of stuffed food, and it's like, I don't understand why Emile can't do that. But thank you again. And so it's, again, we're not fully filled on the clock yet, but he's got them thinking more and more that like, this does not seem like a bad guy here. But back with Emile and Fern, he doesn't have a functional program to be able to do this, but I think Emile is just going to try and do this manually. Like, rather than have the computer handle sorting out all this information, he's just going to be flying around and observing what he can to find, like, let's get you a spot here. So I think this might be best represented as another gather information role, really. Like, he's kind of, it's a form of analyzing evidence, the evidence being like the entire planet in front of him. It's like conducting an investigation a little bit. It's determining where can we find the right biome and like habitat for you by just looking over everything we got. So making another wits roll, and we get... Okay, this turns into a strong hit. So you discover something helpful and specific. It's clear what we got to do, and then we envision what we learn and take +2 momentum. So clearly, when Emile finally just starts doing the flying around and just finding it rather than working on the program, it's quicker going. He's able to find, like, it's probably a little bit tricky at first just because of like the lack of light in the area of the planet that he gets to. Like, everything is recovered in ash as he flies away from the opening in the clouds. And It's got to like shine a light through a lot of ashy winds and dust, and it's not the easiest to find an area, but is able to find a cave system that sounds like maybe it would be the type of place that Fern was describing. Because Fern is given some indications of ideas of how, like, I think Emile asks about a little bit in the process, and according to Fern, pheroids kind of like emerged from cracks in the surface. Like they came from much deeper in the planet at one point and came out through cracks in the rocks into caves, and when in there then kind of worked with the environment, but that the caves themselves had a lot of just natural magnetism to them, and they sort of were birthed in that environment. So Emile is able to indeed use basically like a regular old compass and find where they are, where he's getting the most distortions, finds these caves that are drawing the compass needle in, gets close to it, and figures this has got to be as good of a shot as any. So we're going to take +2 momentum. So the way Fern has been describing this, the idea is that ideally this is a cave that has some of those sorts of fissures that pheroids like Fern were able to come up through the fissures into the cave, and it's sort of a big, almost like ant hive like interconnected system of fissures underneath the surface. And so Fern would like to be brought to, like, they want to find one of those fissures that they can ideally go inside, rejoin the sort of like the network, and be able to find the most suitable cave, even if it's not this one. Like the fissures will at least allow them to travel beyond and get to where they need to go. Now, based on other things Fern has said about the wildlife in the area and what he's probably learned from Vert when they were traveling back to the ship, is that, you know, there are a lot of dangerous things out here. We've seen the radioactive mantis creatures and shit like that. Emile's a little bit wary about just opening up and navigating into the cave with Fern alone. So I think I'm going to have him try and convince Vert, the dude with a big ass gun and power armor, that, hey, maybe could you come along with us? But Vert, especially after the sort of poison that he's been hearing from Zoya, is not so completely inclined to do that. So we're definitely going to have to make this a roll. Emile just simply beseeches him like, hey, it's probably going to be a little bit dangerous out there. I was hoping maybe you come along for backup, and that way we can make this all as quickly as possible, get Fern back to where they need to go, get back into the ship, get on out into orbit, and get you off this place. Huh? How's that sound? So we're going to do this as a heart roll, and we get a full-on miss. Now, I could burn momentum to turn this into a weak hit, but I kind of like this as a moment of refusal, given the problems with Zoya. I think he's just going to full-on say, like,
Pretty sure we told you before that our interests are off this planet. Personally, I don't see why you can't just let that little blob thing over there find their own goddamn way. Open up the door, let them get out, and then fly us on out of here. Come on, I want to get off this planet.
And Emile's unwilling to do that. Like, he's going to accompany Fern, but clearly is not going to have the help of Vert or Dash. Now, in addition, we do have to pay the price, and I feel like the best price on this is definitely, it's gotta be filling in that fourth circle, right? Like, while Emile is gone, Zoya is going to get let out of the cell. That's just part of what's going to happen. They're upset enough with him wasting all of this time. The last little piece is going to fall into place when that happens. Like, this doesn't happen immediately when Emile and Fern get off, but at some point, Vert and Dash are going to have a conversation all about, like, what Zoya said they did. Now, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal, and that Dash is definitely going to bring up what he learned about Emile and the Vault Hunters and all of that, and that this is a public enemy #1, and it's going to push them over the edge. I think that's probably the moment where Vert just says, like, well, what are we even doing here? Like, why? If he's leaving the ship behind to us, who cares? Let him be stranded. And I think Dash, like, has wanted to do that this whole time, but certainly said he wouldn't, and, like, didn't want to admit to himself that that's what was happening. But he kind of did the coward's way out here, where he said the thing that he knew would push Vert towards opening up the cell and, like, changing allegiance, because that way it's Vert's doing, not him, right? And Vert is clearly too powerful to stop. He couldn't have stopped him. So that's the moment where it happens, but that's a little bit in the future. That'll happen in the nebulous time when Emile and Fern are off the ship. Like, they'll have made the decision to do it. What I'm going to do is at whatever point that Emile and Fern get back, we're going to do it as an oracle roll at that time, where we're going to find out, with the odds getting more and more likely the longer that Emile and Fern take, is Zoya already out of the cell, or do we just come back to like the moment where that is happening? We're going to do that as an oracle roll later. For now, it is a complete unknown. So Emile is going to set his gun back into the kind of regular fire mode. He doesn't anticipate needing to melt rocks as much as he needs to be able to put out some actual blaster fire in case there are some enemies here. So he switches that back into the mode it had before. He's still going to definitely suit up with the smart gun platform and be able to get the benefit that he might have from that. Make sure that it's all operational. Does some like test fires and stuff to make sure that it's all calibrated correctly and aiming and good to go. Emile's definitely got the rebreather in because of just all the ash in the air. And then I'm going to try and treat this as kind of one broad face danger move. Because Emile and Fern need to find these fissures in the cave system. They need to find these fissures in order for Fern to be just home, right? And while that does sound like it would be a wits thing to find them, I think the wits isn't what the narrative tension is about. That's shadow, which Emile is not very good at, of course. Because there are definitely other creatures in this environment. There are hostiles, more of those mantis creatures. There are some things that could really do some problems to Emile out here. Like these insectoids are some of the only things that have, like insectoids and pharoids, they're what survive in this awful wasteland. And they are trying to get whatever food they can get, so they're pretty hostile to just about anything Emile-sized. So this is a face danger with stealth. Sorry, shadow, because it is about stealth. How well can Emile stay quiet and, like, stay to the shadows while they look for these fissures? Because they'll find them. That's not what the tension is about. It's do they find them without getting caught? I guess we did describe Emile making preparations with like making sure all of his gear was working correctly in the smart gun system and all of that, and that it was all calibrated and aiming well. Now last time I gave myself the ability to sort of fire this gun with wits because it was a smart system and it was all about his calibrations. That was true when it was more about the melting stone in a more slow controlled process. I think it all happens too fast for me to say that this is about Emile's wits this time. This is still more about like twitch reflexes, speed, agility. That's what's controlling it. Like when you use the smart gun system to actually like fire like a gun, we're back into edge territory here. That'll be what we use if we need to fire this. However, I do still think the types of calibrations that he is doing on this system to make sure it all works and like that sort of precision slow stuff to make sure it's aimed just right and like is synced up with his computer correctly and hit like anything he could target with like his eyes on AR, like it's synced up together so that like he can look at a target and like his AR can interpret his gaze and then send that command over to the smart gun system to just automatically target that. If Emile does like the right kind of hand gesture, like making sure all of that's working correctly, that's wits still. So secure an advantage with wits as he makes sure it's all calibrated just right. Okay, we get a weak hit on that. So I can either have the momentum or +1 on the next move. Now the 2 momentum would bring me up to a momentum of 8, which would be very helpful. +1 on my next move would certainly help because we're about to have to make a face danger with shadow. But I think if we get our momentum all the way up to 8, that'll be so likely to cancel out most problematic dice. Let's take the momentum. And it also still makes sense where like we are building up the momentum as like this is practically a gear up sequence. Like it all happens in a montage. We're getting this along. Emile is ready to go. He like hypes himself up, brings the ramp down so that they can exit the cargo bay and head into the cave. Emile says behind him to Fern like, all right, let's do this quickly as we can. And Fern like does their slow kind of like rolling, shifting. Like Fern has never exactly been a fast creature, and this is no exception. And Emile just goes, right. All right, well, let's do this as best as we can. And like pops the rebreather back in. He can't really be all that understood with the rebreather in his mouth. And the two of them head in there, and let's do this face danger with shadow to see how this process goes. Okay, indeed. I made the right call there. We only got a 3 total. So +1 would have given us a 4. Our challenge dice were a 6 and a 4, so that would have been a full-on miss, which it still is, but because of our momentum, we can get a strong hit. And if we hadn't increased our momentum, we could have still burned it to get a weak hit, but not a strong one. So we made the right call on this, burning it all for a strong hit. And so, quickly and quietly, it helps that there's probably there's not specifically making a lot of noise. Fern, while slow, is can control their colors to blend in as best as possible. There's a lot of shit in the air that makes it hard to see. It's probably we're going to say there's even a little bit of a gusty wind blowing across the cave surface that makes a bit of a howling noise that gives them a little bit of noise cover as well. And perhaps that's kind of what the momentum helps them with, is it's the right kind of moment where the noise is just covering various things that they might have had to do inside the cave. We see a little bit of the sort of cool lighting of Emile every once in a while has sort of those blue grid lasers scanning over various things in certain patterns, looking for areas where there are micro fissures and analyzing how those are changing in order to orient which way they have to go and where they're going to likely find more of them. They get deeper and deeper into this cave system, but eventually do find the types of cracks that Fern is talking about that are deep, and I think we even see the inside of these cracks is it has sort of a permanent coating like Fern's flesh. Not in that it's a ferroid, it's not like a ferroid residue left behind, but it also has that sort of a shimmery technicolor quality to it, where it's just the sides of these fissures are shifting in a lava lamp way through various colors in the spectrum. Clearly, they have found the right spot. And I am definitely going to give Emile the final bit of progress on return Fern to their homeworld. Because we did one better. We brought him back to the most ideal spot in their homeworld. We brought him back to the fissure system where ferroids came from. So we're at 10 out of 10 progress here. We're going to resolve this vow. As Emile and Fern sit there, the dust isn't so bad in here anymore now. They're deep inside a cave, so Emile has his rebreather out of his mouth. And Emile gestures to it all and says, "This seems to be the spot, or as best as I can do anyway." It's been an interesting time that we've had together. I think we can both agree to that. And I really want what's best for you. I'm glad we could get you here, but I have to ask you, is it everything you hoped for? My people have this saying of, you can't go home again. And I can't help but think of it when I look around here. I mean, maybe it's just my own human perspective on this and I can't see the beauty in it that you can, other than the beautiful colors, of course, but it just seems so desolate and maybe this would have been a home for you back in the day, back before you absorbed me and took on the kind of human intelligence and awareness of the environment that you now clearly have. But I just can't imagine that seeing it for myself, is this really what you want? I ask you now because, look, as soon as I leave this cave, I'm taking off and leaving the planet. I don't know if I'm ever going to come back. There may not be a way to turn around, so this is sort of the last chance to really reflect and say, is this really where you want to be? Because while I vowed to bring you home, maybe your home isn't here anymore. Maybe your home is with me on the Stardust, while we go see what's out there in the galaxy and help each other out. So the way I'm going to do this is, first off, this is all kind of part of Emile finishing his vow. So we're fulfilling the vow, partly asking this question. And so I'm going to fulfill it. We've got 10 out of 10 progress, so the only way we could fail this would be with a double 10 complication. So I'm going to do that first, and then, assuming it's almost certainly going to be a strong hit, 99% chance of that, I'm then going to have Emile do a compel roll. Because it's important to him to convince Fern that this place won't do it anymore. And I don't think Fern is all the way there yet. So it's definitely a matter of the dice. So first off, fulfilling the vow, Emile has done it. We don't get that 1% chance. It was totally a strong hit. And, oh man, it was a 1 and a 3. We could have ended this so long ago. But anyway, the vow is fulfilled. This has clearly brought Fern as home as possible. This may even be the exact cave. There's no way to know. So I get 2 ticks on the Quest Legacies track. Doesn't full on fill in a box, but gets us 1 tick away from doing that. And importantly, means that I can finally check off this vow that's been on our list for a long time. We're now down to just a few main ones. We got some like long-term things. Certainly our epic vow about VY572 and our barely made progress on clearing Shark's name, which it's not a full-on epic vow, but I've definitely been treating it almost like kind of a secondary background vow that just like motivates Emile's desires, but isn't really a strong impetus in the moment. And then, of course, the one that is and will have to be the up against the clock, I will make amends to the people of Concord with the gift of a power core. Now we can finally focus on that a little bit more. But first, as the two of them are here, and Emile tries to compel Fern that now that they've gone all the way here and seen together what home is, does it have to be home? So this is a... Oh, you know what? The way I'm actually going to do this? Fern is a connection. And one of the things that develops a relationship with a connection is when you complete a quest to their benefit, which I very much did. So when that happens, I need to develop the relationship. We don't have a bond yet, so we mark progress. This actually gives us the last 2 boxes of progress on that connection track as well, which means we can forge a bond with 10 out of 10 progress on this, which really makes sense for this moment of like, hey, I want you to live with me. So rather than compel Fern, I think it makes more sense to be like, you know, on the 1% chance that we still get a miss with a match on this, Fern will refuse. But otherwise, I think this is the moment the bond is forged where Fern decides this isn't my home anymore. So we roll the challenge dice against these 10 progress and we get... Oh, okay, one of the dice did turn up a 10 and I was worried the other one was about to, but no. It is actually a weak hit, which it occurs to me, I suppose it wasn't a 99% chance of a strong hit last time, just a 99% chance of a hit. We could have gotten 110 and not the other like we just did now. So on a weak hit, we will get to mark we're going to get to mark 2 ticks on our Bonds Legacies track. We're going to get to choose either to bolster Fern's influence, which is that we get a +2 from Fern's help instead of a +1, or we keep the +1, but we give him a second thing they can help us with. And same thing where we get +1 and take +1 momentum on a hit. I'm not sure which of those I want yet. I'm leaning more towards the first because Fern is relatively simple in what they can pull off. Like, there's not that much they can help with. Though I suppose we could get Fern's help with things like mind reading. Given Fern's abilities to, like, subsume people, that would be another area we could maybe add in as, like, something they can help with. Is just that sort of psychic reading of people when they're inside of Fern. But importantly, this is a weak hit, so Fern does ask something more of me first before they become a bond. So to actually gain the bond and that whole legacy reward I was just talking about, I got to envision the nature of the request and do it, or swear an iron vow to see it done. So we got to think about, what does Fern want right now? Is it a full-on vow-worthy thing, or is it something Emile can just do right here in this moment? All right, I think I have an idea of what this is. Fern has colors of nervousness and stress that Emile definitely recognizes. And Emile says, God, I'm not trying to make this difficult on you. I'm just... And Fern kind of gives the sign of no, and listen. And starts trying to communicate a couple of things. And it becomes clear, like, what they're trying to communicate is complicated. And, like, they keep, like, starting and abandoning certain signs that they've worked on. And Emile is like, I don't understand. What do you... And Fern communicates, can't, home, not, ship. Then eventually, after all of that frustration, complicated, colors slow, need talk. Real talk inside. And Emile pieces all of that together after a period of time and recognizes that what Fern needs from him in order for this to be a full-on bond is Fern needs to talk to him in the more real, like, conversational way they can do when Emile is inside of Fern. It's a gesture of trust because Emile knows that last time he was not able to get back out without Fern letting him back out. But despite the fact that they were kind of on each other's case again recently, Emile does trust that. And Emile indeed nods his head and, like, outstretches his arms as a kind of gesture of form around me. Let's do this. Knowing that this is kind of a step beyond the times that Emile has worn Fern as a suit. Because when that happens, like, Emile's body is inside of Fern, yes, but what Fern needs is a full-on, like, taking over his mind again. And that involves, like, kind of going, like, around him and kind of inside of his orifices a bit. Like, it's a much more invasive sort of thing. But Emile consents to it this time, and Fern indeed wraps around him and takes him over, and it's a shock at first, and Emile gets a deep breath beforehand, but then before he knows it, it's a very disorienting thing, because Emile kind of like blinks, opens his eyes back up, and he's no longer in the cave. Once again, he's on the outside of the Stardust, in the middle of space, as far as he can see. And Fern's kind of avatar, the way that they depicted themselves last time, with the very, very long hair and tall form, like tall and lanky form, like, the two of them are sitting together on, like, the outside of the hull while the ship goes through space, and it's Emile's kind of happy place version, it's the colorful nebulae all in the distance, like, it's utterly beautiful space with lots to see, more than you would ever normally find. They're coasting along, and Fern's form turns to Emile and says, "This will be much easier. What I have to say is too complicated for the color system. It was too slow, and this is too nuanced." Well, I'm here, and my understanding is I don't have that long, so what is it you have to say? "I believe what you say. I believe your ship and time with you could be more home. I want it to be home, but it can't be right now." Why? What? I don't understand. What's the problem? "The prisoner, the captain, as you call him, he is still there, and he is a danger. Far too dangerous to be left alone like that. In order for that to ever be home, that's a force that must be reckoned with. I can't be on a ship that houses such a dangerous creature, you must understand." "I do understand. And believe you me, I don't want the captain there any more than you want him there. But I'm a bit at a loss here. We've got him in a cell right now. He's a bit taken care of, but as you just said, he's so powerful. What do we do? I ask you as a friend for your advice. What do we do about the captain?" And I think Fern comes at this from a bit of a different angle than Emile would, because up until recently, Fern was very much a eat and survive kind of animal. Didn't have this whole large concept of morality and ethics of whether or not you should murder. Like, that's not a factor. It's just a eat or be eaten sort of life for an animal like Fern had up until very recently, relatively. So I think Fern just is almost confused by the question and says, "We do the obvious. We have to kill him. Tell me you'll kill the captain." Emile says, that doesn't sit right with me. I can't, there's something more going on. It's not just, there's a person in there, and I don't think the person is the one who's responsible for all of this danger. If we kill the person, the danger remains. So I can't promise you to kill the captain. That won't do it. And I fear that the danger behind the captain is so great that I don't know if I can promise to kill that either. I've already devoted myself to killing one god. I don't have it in me to kill a second. But here's what I will say. Just like I said before, there's always a way. If we put our heads together, there's always a way. And so what I can promise you, I will bargain with this god, whatever it is that's taken over the captain. The wooden heart. That's what he calls it. When he thinks on it, in the glimpse that I had in his mind, he calls it the wooden heart. Then I can promise you we will find a way to rid ourselves of the wooden heart. Rid it from our lives anyway. I can promise you that much. And so let's indeed have Emile make an iron vow here. Now, because he's not vowing to kill the wooden heart. That would be a tremendously big vow. Like, as far as the danger of it, that's probably its own epic vow again. We're not going for that. I think because the goal is just to basically rid them of the wooden heart and its influence on their direct lives, that's only going to be a level 3 vow. What is that again? Formidable. That's only going to be a formidable vow. Now, putting my cards on the table, I as a player don't actually want to spend too much time pursuing that vow. So I don't expect that I'm going to try and mark off 10 boxes of progress on that. This is a vow that, depending on exactly how it goes, probably going to try and end relatively early and accept that there just may well be some narrative consequences. It may not go smoothly, but that's okay. That's where the fun lies. But I am going to swear this vow. It is a formidable vow to get rid of the wooden heart. So let's swear that. Now, in order of operations, Fern is still a connection until we swear this vow. So we don't get to add a +2 to it because Fern is not a bond, but we do get to add a +1 because we are swearing this vow to Fern. So we make a heart with a +1 roll, and we get... Oh, nice. A strong hit. Nice. We are emboldened, and it is clear what we must do next. Take +2 momentum. So a couple of things happen. First, we get the +2 momentum. Second, let's determine what we need to do next. And then third, let's turn Fern into a proper bond and figure out what version of bond they are going to be, because this is the moment where it happens. Now, as for what we have to do next, Emile says, I have to imagine the grip of a god is tremendously mighty, and I don't think we're going to be able to pull the captain out of its grip ourselves. We need to find a way to get the wooden heart to let go. It needs to be in the wooden heart's best interest somehow. I think we somehow need to find a weakness. Maybe there are people that know more about it. Now, the captain and his crew, they were around Anubis. Maybe there's some people there that know a little bit more. Perhaps on our way out of this sector, we should stop by Anubis and see if maybe they have anything they can do to help us. So let's make that vow official. We have a vow to rid Emile and Fern of the wooden heart. A formidable vow that we've definitely got no progress on. Now, for our next little bit of bookkeeping, we need to make Fern into an actual bond. So I'm going to make a note about that Fern is now a full bond. So we need to decide. We have our two options here. Either Fern becomes a +2 metal manipulator, or we give Fern a secondary role. And I think I'm leaning towards that secondary role thing. I kind of talked my way into it when I brought it up before. I think that we've learned that in addition to being a metal manipulator, Fern is quite talented at mind reading. But specifically, mind reading somebody that is inside of them. So, second role is mind reading someone inside Fern. It's a very specific role, but Fern has that too. And I think the reason why that capability is being added in now that they are a bond is representative of how, like, there's that trust there between the two, that now things that Fern learns will inherently be things that Emile learns. Like, they're more willing to share with each other. Obviously, not literally like on a psychic connection type of thing, nothing like that. But it's more open communication. In addition to all of that kind of like technical bookkeeping stuff, I think now that they are fully bonded, Emile and Fern are going to have a much easier time being able to just openly communicate. Like, their system of like their charades-like system of color interpretation is going to get on the level of like Han and Chewie. Like, Emile is going to know what Fern is trying to communicate, even if it's a little bit more complicated. This is the moment where that becomes a little bit more true. So with all of that decided, Fern purges Emile back out of their body. Emile certainly takes a big gasping breath back in, almost on instinct, and the two of them take one last look at the shimmering multicolored fissure in the ground, and then recognize that, yeah, that's not home, and they begin to leave the cave to get back to the Stardust. It took getting all the way here to realize it's what they both wanted, but they hit that point together. Now, by the time they get back, things might be a little bit different on the ship. We're going to need to roll an eventual oracle to figure out how long in the process are we with Zoya being left out of their cell. But in order to help inform that situation a little bit more, I'm going to make Emile and Fern get back to the ship with the same sort of face danger stealth move to do that, because it's still just as dangerous on the way out. Also, they could get a little bit lost in this cave. Like, how well did they determine the exact way that they got in here following the system to get to the fissures? It may be a little bit tricky. So let's indeed do that face danger with shadow to just try and sneak their way back out of here. Okay, I did get a strong hit on the way out. You're successful. Take +1 momentum. So our momentum is all the way up at 5. I was worried that maybe that... I was certainly given the opportunity for that to be a little bit more complicated but by the time we got there, but the dice say, no, we got in, we got out, no problems. There's still the same kind of gusty wind covering our tracks and all of that. So between getting in and out with no real, not even weak hits, it's clear that they weren't gone for that long. So I need to make that all-important Oracle move where we ask, do Emile and Fern get back in time, like, before Zoya is properly out of the cell? Like, we know that Vert and Dash have decided that is what they're going to do. They're on their way to do it. But does Emile get there before they do? How am I going to put the odds on this? Considering it was a relatively quick process, I'm just going to put this at... I'm going to put it at likely that we get back before he's truly out of the cell. We really didn't take all of that long. If there had been some more weak hits and misses and stuff, we clearly would have moved down the chain towards 50-50, unlikely, small chance. We would have gotten there, but really, we did this as smoothly and quickly as I could have expected. Like, yes, going through all those caves definitely took probably several hours of exploration. Like, it didn't take long for me to describe it, but that was a long journey of working their way through. However, as you recall from the last episode, Emile did put certain protections in place on his ship to kind of lock people out of certain parts of it, so even after they decide that, you know what, they're going to let the prisoner out of his cell, it would probably take them some time to actually get their way through those. So it's likely that we get back in time, but let's see what the dice have to say. Yes, we do get back beforehand. Now it's going to be like right beforehand. Emile is going to get there while they're like in progress. He's going to see something's up here. They're not where he expects them to be. And Emile's like searching around the ship, calling out for them, trying to find where they are. And he eventually does wind up back in that brig area and sees that they're all in that room in that awkward moment where it's just Vert and Dash both in the room. Dash is not near the controls, but Vert is. Vert has their hand literally moving up, ready to power down the thing. Zoya on the other side, playing the innocent, but very happy, like just jubilant that they're about to be let out. Emile catches them in this moment and just says, wait a minute, what are you doing? And it's just as Vert's hand indeed presses on the pad and the crackling field separating them from the prisoner's cell dissipates. But as for what happens next in this moment, well, that's a question for next time. You know, this is usually the time where I have some kind of request for you guys all about helping to promote the show or anything like that. You know what to do, and honestly this time I'd rather spend this moment to reflect on how this has been 25 episodes so far, and you're still listening, and I know I've said this sort of thing before, but I want to take the time to really appreciate it again. Anytime that I see people are still listening, or when I'm graced enough to see feedback from people like Anobarbus, who is just commenting feedback on some of the episodes, and certainly still every time I post an episode, I see what Raul is going to post as what kind of emoji is going to characterize the episode. I love all of it. I really appreciate you all listening, and the fact that 25 episodes in means that you have spent at least 25 hours of your life devoted to just listening to the things that I'm saying, and it's not lost on me. So thank you very much for listening, and with all that said, play me out, music.